Good morning, everybody. This is Imelda.
And this is Madeline. And I'm reading the Society News for Friday, the 7th of April. On Tuesday, the strollers will be meeting, and the stroll will be at Boldner Recreation Ground, with lunch afterwards at the Sun, Calbourne. The group will meet for coffee at the end of the Lime Cafe Freshwater at 10:45. The next session of Introducing Millbrook House will take place also on Tuesday the 11th of April. This is a chance for anybody to come along and discover what is available in terms of equipment or services to visually impaired people. Introducing Millbrook House is open to everyone who would like to find out more about what is on offer. The session runs from 10:30 until 12. The Dolphins group will be meeting also on Tuesday at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. The pool is closed to the public during the session. If you would like to go swimming, please call the Society first to advise us of your level of swimming ability. And please note lifeguards are in attendance during the session. On Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held as usual to support the Society. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea as well as a piece of cake. The Owls will be meeting on Wednesday at 2 p.m. in Millbrook House. The speaker for this week's meeting is Brian, and he will be talking about Robert Hooke. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake. The Knitters and Natterers are meeting on Thursday, the 13th, at Millbrook House. The group starts at 10:30 until 2 o'clock. You can knit or just natter. Then later in the afternoon, volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics. And some other news. Please note that the Society will be closed on Good Friday to Easter Monday, and will reopen as usual on Tuesday the 18th of April. Due to this change, next week's Talking News will be produced on the 13th of April, which is Maundy Thursday.
And to continue, there is the possibility that the Society will be in the position to offer a limited number of places for clients on a basic first aid course. The places would be subsidised by the Society and would take place at Millbrook House later this year. This notice is just to gauge interest and establish whether the scheme would be viable. So if you would be interested in taking part, please telephone or email the Society with your name and contact details. In touch. Regulars to our weekly Talking News will already be familiar with the In Touch radio podcast that is downloaded each week into the memory stick. However, for those of you who have not heard the programme, it is certainly worth a listen. In Touch is broadcast every Tuesday at 8:40 on Radio 4, 8:40 p.m. on Radio 4, and is presented by Peter White. It includes news, views and information for people who are blind or partially sighted, and over the last few months it has covered topics such as the Glastonbury Festival, blind boxing, accessible mobile phones, benefit information, cookery tips, new technology and guide dog waiting lists. If you are unable to listen to the programme live, it is available online or at the end of the Talking News produced by the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind. Please note, transport may be available to some of the groups, but please call the Society first on 522 205. Scaffolding news. I'm afraid there's an awful lot of this. Please find below a list of known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Bay Area. 11A, St John's Road, Sandown, Trouville Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown, 15 Station Avenue, Sandown, 5 Station Avenue, Sandown, due up on the 11th of April, and 23 Atherley Road, Shanklin, due up on the 14th of April. Cherry Pickers and Cranes, Shanklin Cliff Lift, East Cliff Esplanade, Shanklin, East Cliff Promenade will be shut to pedestrians for these works. Cowes area, Development Site Castle Street, East Cowes, GKN Clarence Road, East Cowes, 2 Sunhill, Cowes, Tudor House Bath Road, Cowes, the Aspect High Street, Cowes, due up on the 12th of April, July Cottage, Bars Hill, Cowes, due up the 15th of May, Jersey Cottage, Market Hill, Sunhill, Cowes, due up the 25th of May. Current ordings, 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes, New Cherry Pickers Cranes, GKN Yard, Clarence Street, East Cowes, due up 8th of April. Clarence Road will be closed for these works. New hoardings, 93 High Street, Cowes, due up 10th of April. New Street furniture permits, Staples and Green, 13 Shooters Hill, Cowes. And in the Newport area, Nippert Court, West Street, Newport, Newport Minster, St Thomas Square, Newport, Island Optical 1 High Street, Newport, Precision Hair, 50 St James Street, Newport, 18 New Street, Newport, Old County Press Shop, 29 High Street, Newport, 27 Portland Street, Newport, the Guildhall, High Street, Newport, due up the 11th of April, 60 Crocker Street, Newport, due up the 14th of April, TSB Bank, 119 High Street, Newport, due up 18th of April. In the Ryde area, Spence Willard Estate Agents, Grove House, Sherborne Street, Bembridge, HSBC Union Street, Ryde, Scaffold Tower, due up for one night between the 10th and the 16th of April. Abbury Madeira Road, Seaview, due up 18th of April. Michelangelo's 30 St Thomas Street, Ryde, due up the 18th of April. West White area, On the Rocks, Bridge Street, Yarmouth, 131 School Green Road, Freshwater. South White area, 2 Trinity Road, Ventnor, former Mill Bay Hotel, Esplanade, Ventnor, Empty Shops 46 to 48 High Street, Ventnor, Met Bar, Esplanade Road, Ventnor, due up the 7th of April. That finishes the scaffold news, and finally, this week's In Touch. In Touch, in this week's episode, Peter White talks to the acting chief executive of Guide Dogs, Steve Vide, about his plans for its future, and asks whether waiting lists for dogs are too long and whether the organisation is spreading itself too thinly. We also hear from Alexandra Serla, who moved to the United Kingdom from Slovenia, about her struggle to keep her guide dog Pingo with her.
And now moving on to the County Press news for Friday the 7th of April. And the main headlines are Health Bosses Failing Staff and Patients and Man Dies in Blaze. So first of all, health bosses failing staff and patients. The island's health service now looks certain to go into special measures, as exclusively revealed by the County Press last month. And watchdogs are laying the blame at the door of senior management. The Care Quality Commission, in its draft final report, singles out frontline staff as being caring and compassionate, but calls the leadership team out of touch and reports accusations of bullying and unsafe mental health provision, among many other criticisms. The report was leaked to the county press just days after the departure of the Isle of Wight NHS Trust Chief Executive Karen Baker. Inspectors slammed the top team for being unaware of the safety issues on the front line and in the community. They were said to lack the experience, capacity and knowledge needed to lead effectively, and staff felt they focused on financial outcomes rather than patient care. The report stated, "We found the senior leadership team did not have sufficient capability or capacity to support and move the organisation at a necessary pace and to ensure quality and safety of services. This was particularly evident for mental health services, but also across the Trust. The board was criticised for approving a savings plan despite being unhappy with it and being unlikely to be able to deliver it anyway. Staff were caring and compassionate, but sometimes disillusioned and bullied by aggressive management, it was revealed. The mental health inpatient service was slated for being unsafe, with broken beds, live broken electrical sockets, and points from which people could hang themselves. Most of the dying patients were not transferred to their preferred place of death, and their privacy and dignity were not always protected. Understaffed wards put patient safety and care at risk, and staff morale was said to be very low. Hard-working staff were praised for going the extra mile, but failed to consistently report incidents, as they did not see the point and did not believe it would make a difference. The only area rated as outstanding was the post-discharge medicine service, which made sure people got what they needed and helped prevent readmission to hospital. The hospital was said to have a culture resistant to change, and the blame culture had not allowed clinical directors to make changes. Nursing staff in the acute medicine services did not have key competencies to care for patients, inspectors claimed. Despite Karen Baker stating she was proud of the My Life a Full Life programme when she resigned, the CQC said there had been slow and little progress, and the island had a shortage of dementia care beds for its ageing population. And so what happens next? The CQC report will go to the NHS Improvement, which should place it in special measures. The Isle of Wight NHS Trust will draw up an action plan. NHS Improvement has a range of help it can give, and NHS Improvement has sanctions, including hospital closure, it can implement if things don't improve.
Man dies in Pan blaze. Arson is being investigated after an elderly man died yesterday, Thursday, following a fire at his bungalow in Newport. Firefighters from Newport, East Cowes and Ryde were called into the blaze at Furlong, which broke out at around 5:20 a.m. Police later confirmed a man, named locally as Dennis Driscoll, 79, was found dead in the property following the fire. At its height, smoke from the fire could be seen billowing across the Pan area. The roof of the bungalow partially collapsed during the fire. Officers cordoned off a section of the road between St George's Way and Pan Lane while they tackled the blaze. Ambulance crews were called, but later stood down. Police, fire officers and the arson task force are investigating the tragedy. The man who died is thought to have a daughter, according to neighbours. One neighbour, Karen White, 52, of Ash Road, said, "I used to talk to him regularly. He was very nice. He would go to town every day with his trolley. I'm very sorry to hear he has died. Detective Chief Inspector Nick Heelan said, "Our inquiries are at an early stage. We would like to hear from any witnesses or anyone with information about what has taken place. Please call 101, quoting 44170 127728.
And more of the Isle of Wight NHS in crisis. Hospital to stop some treatments. Some specialist treatments will no longer be available via the island's health service, and patients will have to meet strict criteria in order to access them. To save money, the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group has ranked some procedures and treatments as low priority, meaning they will not be readily available to everyone. Only those who meet strict criteria and have been recommended for the treatment by their doctor will have the chance to access it, and some individual funding requests may be required. The decision was made following an evidence-based review by Solutions for Public Health. Dr. John Rivers, former chairman of the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, who was in charge when the decision was made last week, said, "They are considered to be procedures where, on the whole, the benefits are not great. So there is only a very small number of people with very specific things wrong with them that might benefit from them. Those procedures are available, but you need to make sure you are choosing the right patients to benefit. And the following procedures will be affected by the new rules. Laser treatment for a skin disorder which affects an area at the top of the buttocks where a pit forms, meaning loose hairs and debris can get in and become infected. A procedure where faeces from a healthy person are put into the gut of a patient who gets regular infections, helping with bacteria balance. The Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group has only paid for one island patient to have this treatment between 2012 and 2016. A treatment where a small balloon is used to keep the nasal passages open because they are inflamed and swollen. Surgery using a small telescope to remove growths from the nasal passages. Keyhole surgery for knee pain without knee locking in adults over 40 years old."
And there's more news like that. Daytime walk-in centre to close. The daytime walk-in centre at St Mary's Hospital is going to close, the county press can reveal. The Urgent Care Services walk-in section, formerly known as the Beacon Centre, will be closed between 8 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. on weekdays. During the day, people with non-urgent issues should make an appointment with their GP, and doctors are putting measures in place to make it easier, health bosses have said. Those with urgent problems should call the 111 service to be referred to the urgent care service. Patients can still use the walk-in centre during evenings and weekends. The decision was made by the governing body of the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, IWCCG, last Thursday following a public consultation. The CCG said it had considered the impact closing the walk-in centre could have on the workload of GP surgeries, NHS 111 calls and the emergency department, but said it was confident it would work. On average, the walk-in service sees 18 patients a day, a very low number when compared with the 3,000 people seen by GPs each day, the CCG said. Dr. John Rivers, outgoing chairman of the CCG, said the walk-in service did not provide value for money. It is a very small number of people who are using it now, and that is partly because of previous publicity about the fact it was likely to be a service that's going to go, so people are changing their behaviours. I think practices are already aware it is likely to go, so they are putting in measures to try to improve access. We understand what people's concerns are, and we are confident things are in place to mop it up. I think once people get used to the fact it is not there, it will be okay.
Centre wins £42,180 in lottery cash. A huge cheer rang out at West White Sports and Community Centre when it was revealed it had won £42,180 of National Lottery funding yesterday. The Freshwater charity took top prize in the People's Projects competition organised by Meridian News and was given the cheque by TV presenter Andrew Pate. Its Creating Our Own Kitchen, or the Cook project, will focus on helping people with learning disabilities, health issues, young people and those who need support in returning to work by giving them training and work experience. The presentation celebrations were shown on last night's news, and Centre Manager Claire Griffin said, "We thought we had a chance because we have been campaigning for votes relentlessly over the past 2 weeks. It is absolutely brilliant for us, and we had the whole island behind us. There were pink balloons and banners everywhere, and island celebrities posed in our pink T-shirts to promote our cause. This is another step in our history. We are now doing our own catering, and it reinforces what we are able to do for the community. The funding we have received from this project will also help secure the centre's future for another year. Our Cook project will now broaden the volunteering opportunities we offer at the centre. It will help participants to develop skills in a real-life catering environment under the guidance of qualified teachers and working alongside our existing catering staff."
Defence story made up, death trial hears. The law student accused of killing father of 10 Gary Stacey has been slammed by the prosecutor. Ryan Cooper was accused of not acting in self-defence as he had claimed. Mr. Cooper, a black belt in karate, denies manslaughter, saying he threw the punch that led to Mr. Stacey's death in an act of self-defence. He said Mr. Stacey had threatened to knock him out. Prosecutor Andy Houston said, "You were far from defending yourself. It is you who was aggressive towards Mr. Stacey, and that is why his life is at an end." Mr. Houston said Mr. Cooper failed to mention in police interview that Mr. Stacey had said he was going to knock Mr. Cooper out, something Mr. Houston said should have been important if he was claiming self-defence. "I suggest, Mr. Cooper, that it is something you have made up. You have tried to cover up what you have done to make your story sound better," Mr. Houston said. Breaking down in the witness box, at times barely able to speak, 21-year-old Mr. Cooper was called to the stand this week to open the defence case held at Winchester Crown Court. "I wish I could go back now and change what happened," Mr. Cooper said. He told police the day after the incidents, "I didn't hit the man thinking he was going to die. I didn't aim to hurt him. I didn't aim to punch him hard." Mr. Cooper had been walking home in the early hours of the morning on Valentine's Day last year after a night out at Yates Bar in Newport. He said Mr. Stacey approached him and his friends as they walked home along St. James's Street, Newport, and Mr. Stacey had complained Mr. Cooper's group was shouting at him, but they said it was not them, it was a group further up the road. "We were trying to reason with him. He wasn't listening to any of it," Mr. Cooper said. "All of a sudden, he was right next to us, shouting at us. Then he had his fist clenched. He made a movement towards me and looked like he was going to punch me, so I put my arm out and punched him once. I didn't want to get punched." Mr. Cooper punched Mr. Stacey with such force It fractured his eye socket and caused him to fall back and hit the back of his head on the road surface, causing a fracture to his skull and severe brain damage, which led to his death the next day. Mr. Cooper's mother, Sonia Cooper, was called to the stand and told the court, "He's a very calm boy. There is no anger in him," and this trial is continuing.
Platt says verdict utterly shocking. Defiant John Platt, who yesterday, Thursday, lost his case at the Supreme Court over term time holidays, has hit out at the decision. After a 2-year legal battle, which started when he took his child on a family holiday to Florida in 2015, he said the decision meant parents could no longer choose to take their child out of school for even one day. He branded the decision utterly shocking and urged parents and grandparents to take the fight to the ballot box at the local elections in May. Vote to remove people like Colin Noble, the Conservative leader of Suffolk Council. They have issued more fixed penalty notices than any other local authority in the country. If enough parents vote on May the 4th, something will happen, something will change, and the government will pass legislation to mitigate what has happened today. He went on to accuse the Conservative government of attempting to buy votes with a £15 million windfall of extra cash for the Isle of Wight, announced on the eve of the Supreme Court ruling. Please vote on May the 4th to send a very clear message to government that we as parents are the final arbiters of what is right for our children. He will now have to return to the Magistrates' Court, where the case was originally heard. Other island parents would also be facing the same fate. He pledged to fight the case, saying there were many other reasons he would win. A deal made ahead of the hearing means he is not liable for costs of the Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court considered several meanings of the word regular, but ruled that in this context it meant in line with the rules, which require attendance as set out by schools and local authorities. It rejected an argument the intention of the term regular was to mean sufficiently frequently, as this would be too unclear for students and parents. It highlighted that head teachers continued to have the authority to authorise absences.
Miraculous recovery. Just 2 months ago, the popular 22-year-old Rhys Peacey of Northwood was hovering between life and death in a French hospital after suffering terrible head injuries in a hit-and-run accident. Now Rhys is well on the way to an odds-defying recovery from the accident, which nearly cost him his life. As previously reported, Rhys was the victim of a hit-and-run incident in the town of Chamonix in the French Alps in early February, which left him in a coma. However, just weeks after his parents were being told by doctors to prepare for the worst, Rhys is back on the island and is undergoing rehabilitation at St Mary's Hospital. Every day, Rhys's parents and friends see huge improvements in his condition, and they are hopeful he will make a full recovery. Now they want to thank Rhys's friends on the island, as well as staff in St Mary's Rehabilitation Unit, who have supported him. Rhys's mother, Suzanne, who has been by her son's side almost constantly since the accident, said, "His recovery is nothing short of miraculous. The French surgeon turned around and said Rhys was a miracle. He couldn't believe Rhys had woken up." Rhys's father, Adam, 56, said he had been totally out of his mind with worry, but since Rhys had returned to the Isle of Wight, he had witnessed an amazing improvement in his son's condition. Suzanne added, "It makes you realise how precious life is and how quickly your life can be devastated. Every single person in my family has been fantastic." One of Rhys's best friends, Dan Davis, 22, said, We have noticed a huge improvement. Every couple of days you get an improvement. Another friend, Connie Williamson, also 22, added, "He's very determined. It has been an amazing recovery so far." And Caroline Bird, clinical lead physiotherapist in rehabilitation at St Mary's, said, "Rhys has been participating well in therapy and working hard towards his rehabilitation goals since returning to St Mary's Hospital. Rhys has demonstrated good potential and will continue to work within the multidisciplinary rehabilitation team towards optimising his recovery."
Bryston 6 walk. Ladies of the Bryston WI kept calm and carried on after their bus was stopped and searched by customs officers following a trip to the mainland. 6 of the ladies, the Bryston 6, even had their handbags searched. The group were part of 100 Island WI members who travelled to Alexandra Palace, North London, for a craft fair in 2 coaches. Because of work at Whitelinks Gunwharf ferry terminal, the group had to disembark at the Portsmouth International Port. Bryston WI publicity officer Leslie Wilcox said, "We all travelled to the craft fair and everything was fine. It was only on the way back it all went wrong. The first coach sailed through customs, but our coach was stopped. Someone in a high-vis jacket asked the driver to open up the trunk so he could search it. But we had no cases and tried to explain we were from the WI and hadn't come back from France, only the mainland. But he didn't appear to have a sense of humour. Once he realised we didn't have anything in the hold, he then asked if there would be 6 volunteers prepared to step off the coach so he could search their hand luggage. I think he was just trying to save face. As it happened, the people at the front of the coach were all from the Bryston WI. So we got out while he went through our things. We were all good-natured and just let him get on with it. We kept calm and carried on. To be honest, the craft fair was not quite what we expected. However, when we got off the coach, we noticed a container of knives, which had already been confiscated during previous searches. The funny thing was, one of our members bought some kitchen knives at the fair, but left them on the coach while her bag was being searched, so they still got back to the island. A Portsmouth port spokesperson said, "The safety and security of our passengers is top priority."
Boat on rocks sparks alert. 3 lifeboats were called to Binnell Bay after a small boat was abandoned on the rocks. The Coast Guard was called at 9:40 a.m. on Saturday, and Ventnor Coast Guard Rescue Team, Bembridge Royal RNLI, all-weather lifeboat and freshwater inshore rescue boat went to the scene. The Coast Guard confirmed no lives were at risk and the vessel had been abandoned. Failing to report the recovery of a wreck is a criminal offence, and the Coast Guard's counter-pollution team and wreck receiver team have been notified of the incident, a Coast Guard spokesman said. If anyone found anything on the vessel or removed any items, they should contact the Coast Guard.
Isle of Wight restored our faith in humanity. Huge response after puppy mauled. The island community has rallied around a young family after their puppy was mauled by another dog. Izzy and Ben Johnson have spoken about the horrific moment the 12-week-old puppy was attacked in front of their 2-year-old daughter and the remarkable support they've received since. A crowdfunding campaign set up by Ben's sister, Madeline Dew, raised more than £3,500 in less than a week to help cover the expected veterinary bills of £5,000. Mother of 2 Izzy of Ryde said, "It's been absolutely amazing. It has completely restored my faith in humanity. I can't believe what a wonderful community the Isle of Wight is, and I feel so lucky to live here and my girls get to grow up here. I'm just overwhelmed by people's kindness." However, the couple now intend to refund the money after the other dog's owners were tracked down by the police and agreed to cover all veterinary costs. The attack happened on March the 30th when Izzy was walking along Seaview Beach with her daughter Poppy and Ozzy, the King Charles Cavalier. Ozzy was enjoying his second time out of the house since becoming part of the family only 2 weeks earlier. A dog came bounding towards us. It picked my dog up by the face and just started shaking it, she said. There was blood everywhere. It was absolutely horrific. The white dog, described as similar to a Westie cross but bigger, also bit her as she attempted to rescue Ozzy. His leg was broken in 2 places and much of his muzzle was torn away. He was taken to Lumbury Park near Farnham for specialist treatment and has since returned to the family, but has a long road to recovery ahead. Izzy said, "I just thought he was dead. I couldn't see how he could have survived such an awful attack. He's a resilient little chap." Ben added, "The amount of support we've received has been unbelievable. It's amazing. We've even been contacted by people from Australia and America with their best wishes. The family have extended their thanks to the police for their help. They would also like to encourage anyone who donated towards Ozzy's treatment to forward the money on to a local charity instead."
Welcome the money. Cowes is like a Mediterranean town in the summer, and its shops should open in the evenings to reflect it. That is the view of Holly Tree House bed and breakfast owner Mandy Reen of Park Road, who has encouraged fellow business owners to seize nighttime opportunities during Cowes Week and the summer. Speaking at Cowes Business Association's annual meeting, Mandy suggested business owners work together to make the most of the money that was on the water during Cowes Week. "We've been told over and over the money is on the water and sailors come into the town from 5 p.m. onwards," she said. "All the shops are closed then. It's only bars and restaurants open, so it doesn't work for everyone. We need to work together to make the most of the opportunity. Cowes is like a Mediterranean town in the summer."
Concerns over stripped arena. Campaigners battling to save Ryde Arena for the community fear work to dismantle the interior of the building could put their rescue plans at risk. White Ice Leisure Limited said so far the bar had been ripped out, the reception area had gone, and ceiling tiles had been torn down by leaseholders AEW over the past few weeks. And the group fears if seating was taken out and the ice pad demolished, taking over the arena for the community could prove to be too costly. The county press understands workmen have been asked to remove everything except the seating and the ice pad. However, the director of White Ice Leisure Limited, Robina Marshall, said, "We are very concerned about it. AEW claims it is only taking out what it needs to take out in order to meet insurance requirements. It really depends what it moves. If it starts taking out the barriers and the seats, it would start to make it really difficult for us." White Ice Leisure Limited has been officially registered as a company by the Ryde Community Action Group, which wants to save the arena for the community. A demonstration was due to take place yesterday, Thursday, by people concerned about the future of the arena. As previously reported, AEW, the rink's leaseholders, recently put up the lease for sale for £3.5 million, more than 3 times the price it originally paid for it, despite the fact the rink is now in a far worse condition than when AEW acquired it. A vote by Ryde Arena Community Action Group confirmed the group was in favour of buying the lease under the Localism Act. AEW said it was not in a position to comment this week.
£9.5 million plan to ease traffic congestion in Newport. The entire road network between the Asda development and Camp Hill is to be remodelled and the lower part of Newport High Street pedestrianised to improve traffic flow around the town. New junctions, traffic lights and even a bus lane could be on the cards in an effort to reduce congestion around the Coppings Bridge and St Mary's roundabouts and around Newport generally. The works will be paid for by a £9.5 million grant from the Department of Communities and Local Government, following a successful bid made last year by the Island Independents, then in charge of the Isle of Wight Council. The work is expected to be completed over the next 3 years, paving the way for the redevelopment of the former Camp Hill prison site. Council leader Dr. Dave Stewart said efforts to tackle traffic congestion on the roads around the site could include the creation of a bus lane, as buses were regularly delayed at St Mary's. Island Independent leader Councillor Julia Baker-Smith said the lower part of Newport High Street could be closed and a link opened from Furlongs along St George's Way. Welcoming the funding, Councillor Stewart said the money was a huge win for the island. What this means is quite simple. We now have funds to make a huge difference to residents by easing congestion in Newport. This significant amount of money shows beyond any doubt the island is willing to help this island. The government is willing to help this island, he said. Councillor Baker-Smith said the financial award is the result of efforts by the Island Independent Administration, council officers and the Homes and Communities Agent over a long period. I am grateful for the time and effort many officers have spent securing these capital funds and am excited by the opportunities they open up for the island.
Bring on a fixed link, say 2/3 in poll. People have voted by more than 2 to 1 in favour of a fixed link with the mainland. In the survey commissioned by the Pro Fixed Link campaign, 66% were in favour, 29.1% weren't, and 4.9% were undecided. When it came to a full feasibility study, people voted by more than 3 to 1 in favour. Organisers said the purpose of the survey was to establish whether people were in favour of a study to see if a tunnel could and should be constructed under the Solent. The 6-week questionnaire closed on March the 31st, and organisers admitted while it was set up to enable only one response from each computer, they were aware some individuals found a way of making multiple responses. But report author, professional survey organiser Ian Butcher said, the level of attempts to discredit the survey and skew data by a few individuals has been relatively easy to detect. Their behaviour shows disrespect for genuine individuals who have contributed their views on either side. I believe the data in the final cleanse report represents as far as accurately possible the data from genuine contributors. Responses from Maury Gallup, Fred Dinage, Frank James, Theresa May, Donald Trump, and people purporting to be pro-fixed link campaigner Carl Feeney and members of his family were weeded out. He defended the framing of questions against allegations of bias and said he believed most people taking part had given honest answers. It showed nearly 60% of those participating were aged between 30 and 60, with only 4.7% under 20 and 17.9% between 20 and 30. Isle of Wight residents outnumbered those from the mainland by 7 to 1. Most of the report's 346 pages are taken up with the views of those taking part about the potential effect on the island's economy, accessibility, environment and quality of life. Mr. Feeney, who has campaigned for 2.5 years for a fixed link, said, It is impossible for people to make an informed decision until there is a proper, impartial feasibility study. It is that study we want. The DfT is prepared to carry it out, but the support for it is needed from the Isle of Wight Council. Constructive meetings have been held, and I am hopeful for that support after the next election.
And with that, it's goodbye from Imelda and have a lovely weekend. The sun's shining.
And it's goodbye from Madeline.
Well, here we start with part two. I'm Peter Boffin
and I'm Anne.
And now, some letters from our readers. From William Hans Brunswick, who lives in Cowes, who says, did the Isle of Wight community really vote for closure of St Mary's urgent care walk-in section of the CCG's public consultation? The latest news comes, of course, from a CCG who reportedly spent a staggering £1.5 million on consultants from a £4.5 million budget for social care. And from the outgoing chairman, Dr. John Rivers, who undermines support for rural GPs and their surgeries by injecting disquietude into the minds of many elderly and vulnerable, dependent and supportive patients, I know how that feels, ahead of the sustainability and transformation plan for rural general GP surgery, constitutes on the Isle of Wight.
And here is a letter from Patsy Lacey of Ventnor. Ventnor Haven generated controversy even before it was built, and the problem of seaweed trapped in it generated a potential health hazard. Rotting seaweed produces a hydrogen sulfide, which in the mildest form produces a bad smell, and at the more concentrated level causes vomiting. In 2011, the town council said it threatened the economic and social life of the town, and Cheetah Marine has since cleared it. The Isle of Wight Council has recently declared the cost of its services unsustainable. An FOI request revealed after some prodding that the Isle of Wight Council had not put out the contract to investigate the haven's problems with rotting seaweed to the normal tendering process. Instead, it had asked for and accepted a reasonable quote from Royal Haskoning DHV, known as RHDHV, of £90,000. Mm-hmm. In a stirring testimony to RHDHV, the council said it had the original designs, drawings and specifications which rendered the company's participation essential. Posford Haskoning, known as PH, an earlier incarnation of RHDHV, did design Ventnor Haven to a specific brief, and details are in the Ventnor Haven, A History, October 2011. There is no evidence how the contract was awarded because the Isle of Wight Council said it had destroyed the records. The design means that at certain levels the haven becomes a sink and everything floating round the mouth, including seaweed, is drawn into the haven and stays there. The RHDHV is a huge multinational marine engineering concern which has worked with the Isle of Wight Council under various titles for over 70 years. It knows the island waters. Seaweed is never mentioned in all the studies, risk assessments and reports. If the brief was flawed, presumably PH should have reported back. If they did not, then the design itself was deficient. Undoubtedly, RHDHV will have ensured it has no legal liability. However, the £90,000 the island is paying for its services will probably be followed by another expensive contract for further services, which can only be provided by RHDHV. Its mainly desk-based computer-modelled environmental impact survey for the South Wight Tidal Array cost more than £600,000. It may be RHDHV's costs are unsustainable too.
Now, George Chesney, who lives in Cowes, said, I would like to endorse the praise of the outgoing St Mary's Hospital Chief Executive, Karen Baker, for the staff and volunteers of the National Health Service on the island. This endorsement comes from personal recent experience of care and attention given to myself and my late wife by staff, plus other close involvement I have had over many years with the hospital. Throughout, I am continually impressed by the sheer commitment and professionalism of all those with whom I have come into contact. In the assessment of St Mary's by the Care Quality Commission, I wonder if due regard is given to the economy of scale problem, that, because this is an island, the catchment population is considerably smaller than most, if not all, general hospitals. Despite this, it still endeavours to provide an impressive range of specialities. With the troubleshooters possibly being appointed to run the hospital decide to transfer more of the specialities to hospitals in Southampton, Portsmouth or even further afield. Already, Helen Shields, who's the chief officer of the CCG, has perhaps hinted at this by stating they were concerned about the substantiability of some services provided by the Isle of Wight National Health Service Trust. If more mainland care is, sadly, indeed the preferred option, what financial help would be forthcoming for the travel costs? Many people on low incomes, and not just those on benefits, would indeed struggle to pay the cross-Solent fares, even the so-called concessionary fares now being offered. Then there is the outward mainland travel to and from a hospital, to say nothing of the lengthy travel time expended. And for many years, the Isle of Wight Council has striven to persuade successive governments, without much success, that the Isle of Wight, perhaps because it is an island, really does deserve extra financial help, as this has been enjoyed, for instance, by Cornwall. Surely special recognition for St Mary's warrants similar extra funding, if the growing deficit is to be properly addressed. These and many other solutions will no doubt be offered as answers to St Mary's problems over the next months. But please, let no one else bring up that old chestnut of questioning why National Health Service money was spent on the multicoloured cone at the front of the hospital, as was intimidated by one person interviewed on television recently. The cost came from an arts budget, quite separate from the hospital, and the money would never have gone on to medical facilities. And unlike some people, I really like the cone. It provides a welcome and cheerful contrast to the dull battleship grey panels which now cover the exterior of the main hospital.
Dave Piggott of Brading writes about help available for those with epilepsy. He says recent editions of the county press have featured articles on epilepsy, one covering the tragic death of a young man, plus a feature on the effect the condition has had on one of our own county councillors. As someone with epilepsy myself, I'm all too aware of the devastating impact it can have on individuals and their families. I developed the condition in 1984 at the age of 32, with no prior warning and no family history. I suffered several fits and went through a very difficult period. However, fortunately, my fits were brought under control relatively quickly, and I've had no problems for many years. I'm one of the lucky ones. I agree with Jeff Lumley that support is inadequate, particularly immediately after diagnosis. However, I would like to let people know that there is a support group on the island, which anyone with epilepsy is very welcome to attend. Thanks to the support of our friends at Headway Isle of Wight, we are able to hold joint meetings on the first Saturday of every month at the Riverside Centre at 10 a.m. Anyone with epilepsy or their family members is welcome. They are very informal and friendly and include lots of tea and cake.
Ooh, yum yum. If you ever use the Island Line trains, you might be interested in what Brenda Buncombe of Sandown says. She says, "While we are delighted, there is a glimmer of hope for the Island Light, and we were horrified to read that through ticketing will be available via web and mobile apps. Presumably, therefore, ticket machines will not do this. There must be many island residents who do not have immediate access to the web or never use a computer. Also, many of the older generation do not have smartphones. We have a landline and a pay-as-you-go mobile in our car in case of breakdown. It looks as though many of the over 70s would have difficulty obtaining through tickets and traffic information and could discourage them from travelling or purchasing senior rail cards. Surely that cannot be the intention of the rail companies. The loss of the extremely good staff at ride ticket offices would be awful for the many residents and tourists who rely on this office to advise on the best routes to take and the best days to travel, whether any strikes are scheduled and whether there is any problem with the boats. None of this information would be available by machine. So there, goodbye machines.
Here's a letter from Councillor Jonathan Young of the Knighton and Whitwell Parish Council. He says, good news about anything to do with the NHS has been in short supply recently, but it is cheering to learn that the island's clinical commissioning group is having second thoughts about the status of our rural GP surgeries, as stated in County Press on the 31st of March. Huge numbers of comments, we are told, followed the proposal to downgrade services in Knighton and God's Hill, among other villages, posing a threat to the surgery's long-term future. Our parish council is proud to have played a leading role in the campaign to make the CCG listen, and I'm also sure a public meeting organised by our Chale colleagues served as an education to anyone who thought this part of the island would roll over and accept such nonsense. The irony of our deteriorating bus services being used as one of the NHS England's reasons for softening their approach will not be lost on local people. We need decent public transport as well as decent health services. Campaigns on both fronts will continue, and we will examine the CCG's revised proposals when they are published with critical interest. There are new faces at the top of the island's NHS, and they will need to be kept publicly accountable, just as their predecessors were.
And Mick Watts of Newport says, I read with interest the article on the County Press on the 24th of March about the regeneration schemes being considered for the Isle of Wight. In particular, the reference to creating an industrial estate on Horsebridge Hill for high-tech companies. I wonder if the council has considered actively seeking out companies that might relocate to the island to fill these spaces by offering incentives. I have connections with a technology company in Devon that in the 1970s transferred to its current site because it was offered favourable terms on a new factory there and has provided a good quality jobs in that area for over 40 years now. And in 1985, Desmond Norman, one of the founders of Britain Norman in Bembridge, was coaxed away from the island to develop his aircraft business in Cardiff with generous support from the Welsh Development Agency. It seems to me building factory space without a company to go in that space is a little pointless, especially when you have the opportunity to build custom facilities to attract a particular industrial sector that will repay the investment with good jobs and career opportunities for our young people. It costs a lot to convert an empty shell into a useful factory, which makes it less attractive to any company considering relocating. Building empty factories is going to give you a lot of empty factories.
Judith Maelstrom from Cowes writes about the suggestion that the new floating bridge should be called Floaty McFloatface. She says, as a direct descendant of the Roberton family, who owned the original ferry rights across the Medina in a small rowing boat, I was delighted to read that the Isle of Wight Council initially turned down the suggested McFloaty name. I feel sure there must be a more suitable name to be found. While I live primarily in the mainland, I also have a house in Cowes and would so like the floating bridge to have a more nautical stroke island name.
Yes, and here's an unusual one, a letter which is good news. It's from Brian Platt of Shanklin, who says, having lived a life scarcely knowing what doctors actually do, I have just had to spend a few days in St Mary's. What a revelation! The warmth, professionalism and care by all the staff was exemplary. Training will only get them so far. They must surely be fundamentally deeply caring people. I did not expect fine dining, but was pleasantly surprised by the quality, variety and choice of simple, wholesome food. My thanks to them all. We are fortunate to have such a wonderful place here on the island.
And finally, 2 very short letters from people who want to say thank you. First of all, from Mrs. H. Perks of Cowes. I wish to thank everyone who has worked hard to make the island so gloriously beautiful this spring. From roundabouts to verges and gardens, there are flowers bringing joy to us all. Congratulations to you all. And from M. Bailey of Freshwater, I would like to say thank you to the young lady with the pushchair on Medina Avenue, Newport, on March the 18th, for helping me with my wife, who had collapsed, and for phoning St Mary's for me.
And now here's a few subjects looking back onto the Isle of Wight. And if you've got a long memory, you might remember 100 years ago, on the April the 7th, 1917. With the scarcity of paper being a very real and persistent problem, the government began putting pressure on newspapers to print only enough copies to fulfil pre-orders and subscriptions. And the county press thought it right to comply at one with the official desires in this respect, and encourage readers to preserve any waste paper for repulping. And also, Prime Minister David Lloyd George said almost no domestic work could compare in importance or in urgency to the production of food, and everything else should be set aside. In response, the Island Agricultural Committee redoubled its tomato growing efforts and offered lettuces on food growing to enable every citizen to pitch in. Oh, you see, 100 years ago.
75 years ago, April the 11th, 1942. The great British art of queuing was brought into question as all order fell by the wayside at the St James bus station in Newport. Police were placed on special duty on Saturday nights to minimise inconvenience and manage the throngs of people. The bus firm was not in favour of erecting barriers, but an order was made that queues would be compulsory. And also 75 years ago, 2 meetings were held by the British branch of the British Israel World Federation. The Speaker, the Reverend C.S. McKelvey, dealt with prophecies concerning the closing scenes of the war and stated it will continue with friends fighting friends as though enemies.
And 50 years ago, on April the 8th, 1967, a Queen of Portugal who ended her days at Ryde in 1909 as a Benedictine nun was exhumed from the cemetery of St Celia's Abbey. So she, with her husband, Don Miguel I, could be given a state funeral in Lisbon. Adelaide of Lowenstein, Wertheim, Rosenberg was exhumed at the request of Don Durante, who's the Duke of Braganza, who wished to recover the remains of royals who died in exile. Also, 50 years ago, a 45-foot luxury sailing vessel was found adrift off the coast of Yarmouth. The Skell Goose, worth £17,000, that's 283,160 in today's money, was found abandoned by a pool fishing boat. The vessel had disappeared from its Wabash mooring during the night, and no explanation as to why could be proffered.
25 years ago, April the 10th, 1992. Isle of Wight Tories were celebrating the return of Barry Field to Parliament, albeit with a considerably reduced majority of more than 2/3, down to 1,827. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats enjoyed an increase of 3,000 votes, and the Natural Law candidate, Clive Daly, lost his deposit, securing only 350 votes. And also 25 years ago, it was the day 23-year-old Louis Young from Sandown got that sinking feeling. Attempting to launch his pleasure boat at Yeverlands, he ended up with his father, Keith's Ford Transport van, stuck in the sand. His planned day at sea was instead a battle against the tide to free the stranded vehicle. Unfortunately, nature was victorious, and efforts to free the van with a tractor and Land Rover proved fruitless.
And 10 years ago, April 6, 2007, Ali Norbush Good successfully found retirement homes for more than 900 former battery hens. With help from her husband James and children Abby, 16, and Loan, 7, the Shanklin woman freed the hordes of hens, giving them a place to roam free and forage in the open air. Friend Jenna Squires also helped, despite not being keen on the birds. Oh, well, I'm glad they remembered all that for 10 years.
And now we come to white memories.
Ah, yes.
Months after Barton Primary School moved from its site of 146 years, the remaining boneheads have decided to hang up their school caps after one last hurrah. Barton has moved to the former Downside Middle School site, and after more than 30 years, the dwindling bunch of boneheads have decided to move on too. The final reunion will be held at the Riverside Centre in Newport on Friday, April 21st, when more than 30 people who remain as proud as punch of their school are expected to relive days gone by. Organisers have decided to call it a day after losing 2 founder members, Roy Hamilton and Peter Meach. Many of the Barton Old Boys went on to distinguish themselves in Ireland and wider life. There were sadly those who gave their lives in 2 world wars. In the First World War, a total of 750 ex-pupils served their country. 73 were to lose their lives, and all are named on the memorial recently re-erected by the parish council outside the Downside School. Survivors were awarded many medals, among them a military cross and 6 military medals. The school produced mayors of Newport and Medina Borough Council in Alan Drudge and John McEwen. There was Maurice Barton, who died a few weeks ago, who went on to distinguish himself in local politics. Peter Meach was a governor of the Albany prison, and David Southerly earned fame as the author of several raunchy Hank Jansen-type books that went on to be made into films. Others excelled on the sports field, and the school produced outstanding local cricketers in Roy Pridmore and Keith Mitchell. On the football field, the numbers are too many to list, but mention should be made of Bob Odell, whose professional career was brought to an end through injury. More recently, ex-pupil Bill Shepherd was to become the first honorary freeman of Newport Parish. One of the reunion stalwarts, Brian Greening, said the earlier Barton regime was very different. There was in the old days an emphasis on discipline, often to the point of being cruel. The boys left school at just 14, but had little difficulty finding work. We had both Saunders Row and J.S. White Shipyard, as well as an island-wide rail network and a thriving town quay. It may seem strange, but the boys grew to respect many of their teachers, and in later years they became good friends. Those who come to mind include Bill Boyland, David Martin, Bill Milton, and Jock Ferguson, all who left an indelible impression on their charges. Going further back in history, there was the legendary headmaster Skipper Ousley, who died in 1945. He was a kind of Mr. Chips, apparently, who earned the respect of the boys. Brian will shortly be depositing all his school memorabilia, of which he has a lot, in the county record office. He said, "Hopefully, ex-pupils will come out in force for this final event, and those who do are asked to bring a small raffle prize, something that has, over the time, helped to make the event self-financing."
And Catherine James has come about with her view of things that have happened on the island. All quiet on the news front, she says. Ages ago, I asked a geek to set up my home computer network to block the Daily Mail website. Sure, the occasional celebrity wardrobe malfunction was moderately amusing, and who doesn't want to see how Brooklyn Beckham is all grown up? But I decided to shield myself from its biliousness, undermining of individuals, entire cultures, and general whipping up of hatred. Take those shock stories about young people and binge drinking, reportage-style photos of swaggering youths with blood-spattered faces in some Middle England town, upskirt shots of vulnerable drunk teenagers lying on the pavement, using a cheap handbag or a cooling kebab as a pillow. Back in my youth, my studently chums and I visited bars to chat about the ozone layer or how cool it would be if you could get an eye on the end of your finger. Nowadays, I normally only go to pubs for dinner, but at the end of March I took rare advantage of happy hour on Newport's Leisure Strip, that bit of town between the Guildhall and the County Hall where the drinking establishments ply their tray. Buy one, get one free cocktails are a great social lubricant, and my friends and I lined up our drinks, sipped their fruity contents, and stared about us. At the far end of the room was someone in a baseball cap, fiddling with the lighting. The bar staff stood about in patient anticipation. It was like that scene in the In-Betweeners film, where the gang of four are lured into the suspiciously quiet nightclub. And we looked out of the window. 3 civil enforcement officers were pointing at coned-off parking spaces. A posse of street pastors sauntered by, pausing to chat to the door security staff and a couple of bobbies. There were more people outside the pub than in it, and all were a variant on community safety functionaries. We were heartened to see our safety and well-being were well resourced, and there was an accidental spillage of drink. When I lived in Portsmouth, this would have been the catalyst for a bit of argy-bargy, and perhaps after a few minutes of aggression, pushing, some screeching of the "it ain't worth it" calibre. But not this time. A cloth was procured, the liquid mopped, and where was everyone? The only young fella in sight told me to try the Bargeman's Rest, but even he was on his way home. I was expecting to be jostled into a corner by Newport's beautiful people, feeling like someone's nan who'd stumbled into the Magaluf coach instead of the turkey and tinsel charabanc. My night on the razzle in Newport was a bit of anticlimax, but in another more joyous way I was thrilled. The Isle of Wight confounded the mendacious tabloids.
And here is Jim Gibbons' article, headed headed "The Game's Up and It's a Month Away." If I say I've always been interested in games, you might well get the wrong idea. My interest is confined to games for the mind rather than for the body, which rules out football and the like. And games which require quick response, such as Snap, exclude those with an able brain but poor control of limbs. A game such as chess can be enjoyed by disabled people, provided they can think and communicate. Chess does not need expensive equipment. Indeed, if you have blindfold with no board and no pieces, though this is beyond me. A board and pieces have been made out of waste paper in prisoner of war camps. It is the sort of game that grabs me. However, it has its faults. Over the years, I have arrived at a list of qualities that make a game great from my point of view. Your list might be quite different, of course, but this is my list. A game should be for 2 people, show all the relevant data, not have any cards face down, be fair even in a single game, have few rules that are learnable in 10 minutes, require little equipment and that inexpensive, not require a randomized strategy, have no chance or luck involved, just skill, end in a win and not a draw, and finally allow for a handicap to enable an expert to play against an inexpert without changing the game radically. Let's see how the games stack up against these requirements. Most card games are ruled out because of incomplete information. Backgammon needs dice and luck. Chess, which I have played badly and greatly enjoyed for many years, is full of unnecessary complications introduced to speed the game up before chess clocks came into use, and 3 out of 5 games are won by white if you ignore frequent draws. Drafts is more often won by black, who move first, and has even more draws. Noughts and crosses similarly. Hex has a known winning strategy for the first player. Go perhaps becomes closest, but again the first player has an advantage. Some years ago, I devised a game called Simultanes, in which the players moved simultaneously, which was fair in individual games and which fulfilled most if not all of the requirements. Draws were possible, but the likelihood of a draw could be reduced as much as players wished. In its original form, it was as austere as Go, and to give it a bit of a story, I made a version which linked it to Walk the White. I offered a computerized version to the hospice if it could find a use for it, but it didn't fit in with the fundraising strategies and would have most likely been a distraction from invaluable work. The board for this game is a map of the island divided into cells. One player will be green and will try to make a green pathway joining Bembridge to the Needles. The other player will be red and will try to make a red barrier stretching from the Solent to the Channel. In each turn, one of the blank cells will be coloured red or green and will stay that way until the end of the game. When all the cells are coloured, if not before, either green will have made his pathway or red will have made his barrier. I now propose, if the editor will wear it, to put a pen and paper version of the game into the public domain in this column in 4 weeks' time. Let's synchronise our watches, calendars. There, I've synchronised mine. I'll see you in 4 weeks, so don't be late.
And if you're the sort of person who likes to sit in a comfortable chair and watch people entertain you, then here's a load of stuff that's coming up soon in the Medina Theatre, which is on the Cowes side of Newport. The Isle of Wight and Southampton Youth Orchestras and Wind Bands will be appearing at the Medina Theatre on Saturday the 9th of April at 6:30, and it'll cost you £8 unless you're under 16, which is £4, or if you're a whole family, then it's £20. And there's also wrestling on the 15th of April at 7 p.m. LDN wrestling, suitable for all the family. I can't imagine that. And the tickets are £14.50 or £12.50, depending on whether you're senior or junior. And then on Friday the 21st of April, Treasure Island, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Tickets are £10 and £7 for under 15 years. Family tickets are available from the box office. And on the 3rd of May at 7 p.m, the Vienna Festival Ballet presents Swan Lake for £21 and £19 for seniors and £13 for juniors. And then the Vienna Festival Ballet presents Cinderella on Thursday the 4th of May at 7 p.m. The tickets are £21, £19 for seniors and £13 for juniors. And on Friday, the 5th of May, the Beach Boys Band. I don't know if they bring a beach onto the stage, but they're there at 7:30 p.m. and they're going to charge you £17.50. Whereas Blake, who do songs from stage and screen, on Friday, the 26th of May at 7:30 p.m., they want £20. And Mercury, who are the official UK #1 tribute to Queen, will be there for Friday the 2nd of June at 7:30 p.m, £17 or £16 for seniors and juniors. And Fleetwood Mac, whoever they are, they're obviously a band of some sort, and they'll be there at Saturday the 3rd of June at 7:30 p.m, and they're expecting £17. Start saving now.
And there will be an Isle of Wight Jazz Weekend in Newport from the 1st to the 4th of June. Acts include the National Youth Jazz Orchestra and many well-known names, and tickets are on sale from the County Press shop right now.
Yeah. And if you like watching local people do plays, then the Oscar-winning screenwriter Anthony Minghella's first stage success, called Whale Music, is being performed in the theatre that is named after him this month, the Minghella Theatre. It's a rare chance to see an all-island production of this raw, emotional and funny classic. Origins Theatre's revival features original music and moving images by island video artist Paul Windridge and includes speed walking, a game of charades and kite flying. Very odd play. The play tells the story of Caroline, a young girl who gets pregnant and comes back to the island alone to have the baby, where she meets up with friends and makes a new one. One reviewer wrote, "This exquisite group portrait by Anthony Minghella, who wrote The English Patient, is a joy, a real find." And the cast includes Marie Hickman, Rebecca Lennon, Pamela Sterling, Lorna Wilson, Kaylee Beckett and Chrissy Blow. So if you go to amateur shows often, you probably know some of those people. And Kevin Wilson of Origins Theatre, who's directing the play, said, "I've always admired Anthony Minghella's work, and it's a proud moment for us to be staging one of his first real theatrical successes at the Key Arts Theatre that was named in his honour. And we hope theatre lovers everywhere will come and see it and rediscover some of the magic that made him such a high-profile figure in film and theatre. Whale Music is being staged for 2 performances only at 7:30 p.m. this Wednesday and Wednesday, April the 26th. And for more information and booking, visit www.quearts.org or call 822-490.
The Island Savoyards present Jekyll and Hyde the musical at the Shanklin Theatre on April the 13th to the 16th at 7:30 p.m. and on the 17th at 2:30 p.m. Tickets are £15 for adults and £10 for children, and the box office number is 01983 868 000. That's 868 000.
Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in digging holes in the ground, the Isle of Wight Traction Engine Club is doing a steel-up and vintage tractor ploughing match at Motterston Manor Farm, Motterston, on Easter Monday. That's 17th of April. It's between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And you're going to see working steam engines, vintage tractor ploughing, fairground stalls and an organ, stationary engines, military and vintage vehicles, an Easter egg hunt, hot food, bar, there's a bar, tea and cake stall, and free parking. But the admission for the people is £4 for adults and £2 for children and old age pensioners. And it's going to be fun for all the family. And there's a picture of the traction engines who are going to pull their equipment all over the field and tear it to shreds.
Well, that's all we have time for today. So it's goodbye from Anne and...
It's goodbye from Peter.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in-touch. Good evening. Tonight, we put questions to Guide Dogs Acting Chief Executive. On the agenda, are waiting lists for dogs too long? Does the organisation spread itself too thinly? And the plight of the Slovenian national who wants to settle here in Britain but fears it may be at the cost of losing her dog.
Pingo is not just usual technical equipment, but he's a live being with a heart, and we have a great partnership together.
More on what help she may be able to get later in the programme. But first, regular listeners will know that for some months now we've been trying to coax the acting head of Guide Dogs onto In Touch. Well, we finally got our man, Steve Vade. He took over last September after the surprise and still unexplained departure of his predecessor, Richard Lehman. We'll be asking him about that and about the apparently ill-fated idea of a possible merger between Guide Dogs and the RNIB. First, though, I suggested to Steve Vade that he would undoubtedly hear from some guide dog owners the criticism that the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association was trying to do too much beyond its core activity of providing dogs. A human guiding service, for example, extending its work to people with a good deal of sight and working with children. Didn't this water down the strong image of just providing guide dogs, which people think they're donating their money for.
At the core of our organisation, we believe in freedom of movement, mobility and orientation for everyone. And we've recognised over the last few years that a guide dog isn't for everyone. We know we've got an amazing base around our guide dog service. And recently we achieved what no other organisation in the world has done. That's to reach our 5,000th active guide dog partnership. But we realise people are at different places in their lives. So our My Guide service, which is our sighted guiding service, is a really early way of helping someone regain their independence, their confidence, their ability to move around their homes and their local environments. Our children's services are really special too. And when we hear about young people, when I talk to parents and families about the difference early years intervention makes in terms of helping a young person navigate their school campus, meet and play with their friends, take part in recreational activities, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
But there is this idea that perhaps this does water down the very key service of using guide dogs to help people around. I mean, what people argue is that extending the provision of guide dogs to people with some vision, for example, which you've done, sometimes quite a lot of vision, and to children are steps too far, that it lengthens waiting lists by increasing demand, and it could result in guide dogs being hurried through training to keep up demand.
Yeah, I think we have to really challenge ourselves to meet the needs of as many people as we can, to really think about mobility in the context of our urban environments and how they're changing, which is why we're looking at technology, to think about what it means for a young person who might have lost his or her sight in early years and how to help them. And that might lead to a guide dog over time. But we know that a guide dog isn't for everyone.
But what about those waiting lists? Because that's one of the reasons people put that argument forward, that with larger numbers that affects waiting lists. If you've had a dog, for example, and you need it replaced, a matter of months is a long time to wait for a dog. And we have heard of cases where people can wait up to a year.
Our ultimate goal is to have uninterrupted mobility for every single person.
Is that achievable?
Over time, it could be, as we look at how we operate differently, how we train our dogs differently, how we work with people with sight loss differently. At the moment, 2/3 of our clients receive a replacement guide dog within 9 months. And if we kind of step back and thought about how long that journey takes, if you and I were to go and train a guide dog today, first we'd have to breed that particular dog. That's reliant on seasonality and nature. Then we'd have to wait for that dog to mature, 12 to 14 months, and then train that guide dog another 4 to 6 months. That's nearly a year and a half, 2 years. So every year we have to make certain projections and predictions about how many replacement guide dogs we'll get, how many new guide dogs we'll train. And that has to be balanced by our ability to raise money. So we make that balancing act in terms of the number of guide dogs we can train and produce. So people don't wait a year and a half, 2 years as a matter of course.
But even the nine months is a long time when you've become dependent. I know you'll say people shouldn't, they should keep other forms of mobility up as well. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a newly blind person, for example, you probably haven't, if you've chosen a dog, you maybe haven't got those levels of mobility to a very good standard. 9 months is a long time to go once you've been trained to do it that way, isn't it?
And in many cases, we know the dog's going to retire, and that's a well-managed process. And we know the individual dog will be replaced within very quick timescales. There are certain cases where that matching process, which is so important, Peter, in terms of a person's environment, how they live, what they want to do with their guide dog, may mean that the process takes a bit longer than usual. But our teams work very hard on the ground. We're connected with our guide dog owners all the time, and we try to anticipate when there might be a break in partnership and work very hard to make that as seamless as possible. But there are occasions where that takes longer than we would wish. Another
suggestion about the waiting list length is that there aren't enough trainers, that maybe it's difficult to keep trainers now. Is that true?
People have worked with us 10, 15, 20 years. People don't want to leave our organisation. They are so dedicated to training our guide dogs, to working with people with sight loss. We do, as with any other organisation, have people leaving for a variety of reasons. It takes, on average, about 2 years to train someone to become a guide dog trainer or guide dog mobility instructor, because ultimately it's about the safety of our client at the end of the day.
Let's just leave the very specific issue of dogs for a moment to a wider policy. Is the idea of a much closer association, perhaps even a merger between guide dogs and the RNIB. Is that now dead in the water, which is what we seem to be hearing from other people and indeed to some extent from the RNIB?
Yeah, it's certainly something we've discussed with the RNIB. We work very closely with them. We work particularly closely on our children's services, on our campaigns, on how we refer people to each other.
But why do you think that hasn't worked? Your predecessor within the Guide Dogs seemed to be coming round to that idea. We know that the former chief exec of the RNIB was very, very keen on the idea. Why hasn't it worked? There's a lot of logic to it, including not duplicating services.
Well, I think our focus is on collaboration and working better for people with sight loss together. That doesn't necessarily have to lead to a full merger, which, as you're probably aware, would cost a great deal of money and present a great deal of risk.
Initially it would, but wouldn't it save a lot of money in the long run?
Well, as other interviews have said in the past, when the time is right, and if there's a right time, we would consider that. But for now, we're really focusing on how we work closely together as two organisations. And we give people with sight loss two independent voices that way as well, which I think is important.
So this is not the right time, you would say?
I don't think so. But again, we work very close together. We're good friends as two organisations, and we'll keep those conversations alive.
Well, thanks for the moment, Steve. There are still a couple of things I'd like to ask you, but there's a story I'd just like to let you hear and perhaps get you to comment on, which is very relevant, really. When Alexandra Serler moved from Slovenia to the UK to live with her partner, she assumed there'd be no problem with bringing over her guide dog, Pingo. And indeed, at first, everything did go very smoothly. And she and her dog moved into their new home in Wolverhampton. However, the plan has had a flaw. The Slovenian government has now told Alexandra that they want Pingo back. Well, Alexandra has been working with her guide dog very satisfactorily for 2 years, and she doesn't want to be parted from him. Well, our reporter Tom Walker has been to Bilbrook, near Wolverhampton, to meet Alexandra and Pingo.
Alexandra.
Yes.
Tom from the In Touch programme.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And this is Pingo, is it?
Yes, this is Pingo. I met my partner. We met online and we started talking. And we visited each other a few times. So I said, I'll come to the UK, we'll try to make the best of it and we'll go further. And I really like it here.
So you made arrangements in Ljubljana to travel over to England. And obviously you wanted to bring your dog with you. Tell us about the arrangements that you made.
Well, I travelled with Pingo before. We travelled quite a lot. And I travelled with my first dog as well. So it's the easiest part, really. He has his passport, he has his identity card, kind of, which says that he's a guide dog, and so I have a proof.
Pingo was trained in Ljubljana. So how well does he work now that you're living here in England?
Good boy! Bravo! Super! Brilliant! He works quite well. Obviously, he needs advanced training, as in he has some difficulties identifying flat curbs, because in my country flat curbs are quite non-existent. We have very high curbs and our roads are much busier and much more confusing.
Now, when you were in Ljubljana preparing to travel to England to come and live with BJ, was there any indication that you wouldn't be allowed to keep Pingo?
Not at all. There was absolutely no indication. As I said, even when I contacted Slovenia in January, telling them that we need to do something, because mainly I contacted them because I wanted to sort out paperwork with Guide Dogs UK, because I wanted him to be signed over here. And I had no idea this would become so complicated.
What support have you had from guide dogs in the UK?
Until now, I had great support. They came twice to assess Pingo. I was visited by 2 guide dog mobility instructors. The first one came just for a very short time, because we didn't even know how to proceed. But the second time, there was another GDMI who came and she took Pingo out. She worked with Pingo. She spoke to the manager, and then the manager told me that guide dogs are ready to put Pingo in a 10-week advanced training to get him accustomed to the routes and to the area.
So guide dogs have been to assess Pingo, and they're happy to give him more training.
Yes.
But there is a problem with the Slovenian government. Could you tell me what that problem is and how you hope it will be resolved?
Slovenian government, the National Insurance Institute, they refuse to sign Pingo over to guide dogs or to me because he's a property of the state and classified as technical equipment. Therefore, he cannot be given to me. They want to give Pingo to someone, another guide dog user in Slovenia.
But given that the Slovenian government have paid for Pingo to be trained, is it not fair that they allocate him to another Slovenian person who lives in the country?
It is fair, but Pingo is not just usual technical equipment, but he's a live being with a heart, and we have a great partnership together. I would be willing to offer to buy him for the same amount of money they used for the training, but they are not willing to sell it to me.
And you've been in correspondence with the Slovenian government as well, haven't you?
So they told me I have 8 days to let them know of date and time of my arrival to the airport in Slovenia. So someone would come and collect Pingo, and I would have to sign some papers and hand Pingo over.
But you're refusing to do that?
Yes, I refuse to do that.
Are you not concerned there might be consequences for you when you do go back to Slovenia if you refuse to let them have the dog?
I am, but I have to take the risk. I asked them in one of my emails what would happen if I didn't hand Pingo over to them, and they didn't respond to my question.
What have guide dogs in the UK said about this dispute that you're in with the Slovenian government?
They are quite shocked themselves. I think I got the impression when I spoke to the manager, she was very helpful and supportive, but they said they are willing to give me full support as soon as I know what's going to happen with Pingo. As soon as I know if Pingo is staying or not, they are willing to start with the training.
Do you have any sympathy for the Slovenian government's position on this? I mean, just to reiterate the point, they did pay for his training, and when you were given the dog, you were living in Slovenia.
I think that they somehow need to change the law, which will be a bit more flexible when it comes to blind people moving out of the country, because we are now part of European Union, which essential idea is for people to be more free with moving from one country to another. Every other student in my country goes abroad for a few months now to study in France, Germany, Czech Republic, UK, anywhere. So they will have to start considering the fact that maybe also blind people want to move, and so they need to change the law so that our dogs will not be taken away from us.
That's Alexandra Serler. Well, we've been in contact with Peter Ruta from the Institute of Health Insurance in Slovenia. He confirmed a lot of what Alexandra told us, that the dog was owned by the insurers, not by the blind person, and that in that case, Alexandra would be expected to return the dog to Slovenia for use by another blind person. What's not clear, though, is what would happen if Alexandra carries out her intention of keeping the dog in England. On a more positive note, Peter Ruta confirmed that as this is the first time this has occurred, to his knowledge, there's an opportunity for international discussion about it. Well, Steve Vade has been listening to all that. What are your thoughts?
We have reciprocal arrangements with over 80 guide dog organisations around the world. We're part of the International Guide Dogs Federation. So it's not unusual for people with sight loss with guide dogs to move countries. We've had guide dog owners in the UK, for example, going to Singapore, going to the US, going to Australia, and vice versa. And we would look after each other's partnerships, each other's dogs and clients as well. So within that International Guide Dogs Federation framework, we have those arrangements in place. I guess this particular issue is between the owner and the local guide dog organisation.
But would the federation that you talk about, or indeed yourselves, would you intervene in a case like this?
That would certainly be a good place to start a conversation about arrangements cross-border.
So we watch this space to see what happens. Just a couple more questions. We talked about your vision of how you'd like guide dogs to go. What about your own future? Are you going to be going for this job permanently?
I'm in a really privileged situation. I'm really enjoying my time as acting chief exec. Our trustees are in the process of looking for a permanent CEO. I can't prejudice that process, so I can't really talk about it, but it would be a great opportunity for anyone. It's a fabulous organisation to work with.
Well, if you were a football manager, I'd be saying, are you interested in the job, Steve?
If I'm interested in it and I am successful, Peter, you'll be the first person to know. I'll come back to you.
Okay, we'll hold you to that. Are you able to tell us anything about when this decision is likely to be made?
It's a process that's ongoing right now.
But you can't give us a date of any kind?
No, I can't, I'm afraid.
Just one more thing. People still don't feel they've actually heard an explanation of the departure of the former chief executive, Richard Lehman. Is there anything you can tell us, anything any more about that would explain why he left suddenly?
Richard gave us a very good handover. I was his deputy CEO for quite a while, and we made that seamless transition. So that was a personal decision for Richard to move on at that point in his career.
But you can understand us having to ask you about this because we've raised it on the programme. And the thing that people notice is just a few weeks before, you seemed very happy and dedicated to the job and used the same terms as you did, a privilege to do the job.
And it was. He led the organisation through an amazing period of growth in terms of our fundraising and reach. And I'm very sure he really enjoyed his time with guide dogs. But he made that decision to move on.
Steve Vade. And that's it for today. We'd welcome your reaction to Steve's interview and Alexandra's story. You can call our action line for 24 hours after the programme on 0800 044 044. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk. And if you're comfortable going online, you can download tonight's programme and get more information about what's on the programme. From me, Peter White, producer Cheryl Gabriel and the team, goodbye.